Welcome to this special editorial edition of the Silver Screen Action Figure Podcast. This is your host, Andre Joseph. And rather than getting into a particular topic, I'm just going to do a little bit of an update with the current status of the podcast. As you probably have seen from the Facebook page, I put a post up last month stating that I would be taking a hiatus from doing podcasting just for the remainder of the summer. I've been doing a lot of traveling. I've had a film festival in Las Vegas that we actually won an award for pertaining to our next project. So I've had my hands full. I also had to spend a lot of time putting together my friend's music video, among other things. And so I just wanted to kind of take a breather from it. Sometimes it's hard to get some of the guys to get together with their schedules and discuss a topic on a particular day. So I just figured, let me just kind of like take a breather for a while, recharge my batteries, and try to come back a lot stronger come this fall. And believe me, we got plenty of topics that we're going to be talking about. And, I also wanted to just kind of reassess the podcast a little bit, figure out our direction, our course of what we want to do. Obviously, you could tell from the episodes that I've done that I've had a lot of fun doing this. And I've had a lot of fun reminiscing with the guys, with our childhood experiences, playing with our action figures, and particularly the ones that were based on these movies from the 80s and the 90s. So, I just wanted to really use this platform as a way to talk about those days and sort of play my little part in reviving what made playing with your action figure so special as a kid, and why it's so missed in this day and age now where everybody's glued to a screen, be it an iPad, be it their phone. Of course, this particular podcast has not been without its share of criticisms, whether it's my voice probably drifting people off when they listen to it for too long, or that we're taking on particular topics for mostly cartoons that are based on movies that have action figures. So, it is what it is. We're not here to try to compete with the junk man or the guys who do the toys that made us. This is a fun thing for us, and we just want to share it with everybody. And of course, things are going to probably change here and there. Some topics are going to be longer than others, some are going to be shorter than others. The point is, I just want to do this for the fun of it. And maybe at the same time, as I said before, from day one, maybe I'll be able to finish some of my old sets that I never got to complete. Because there's quite a few of them from the list that I have. So, that being said, I just want to give you guys kind of a little sneak preview of some of the topics that we are looking to discuss come this fall and into the holiday season, which is going to be pretty significant because the word is that Toys R Us will be coming back right around that time. And while it may not be as big as the old superstores that we used to see in the late 90s and the 2000s, still just the fact that Toys R Us in any form to return, I think, is kind of a big deal. And especially, I know for kids in the past year or so who were very upset with it, I'm sure this will be a nice surprise for them. And I'm glad that it's not quite a done deal yet with the toy building or the buying your toys in a store as opposed to buying it online. I think it makes a huge difference. That being said, let's talk about some of the topics that we're thinking about. So probably the first big one that I'm planning to do is the toy line for Kenner's Police Academy. And this one I also remember very vividly because when the figures came out, you had the animated series that was airing in syndication. And it's funny how it's another one of those movies that started out as an R-rated comedy, and then as sequels went along, it got played down into more PG fare for the kids. And, it ended up spawning this interesting little toy line and had, I think, a play set that rivaled the Ghostbusters Firehouse. And I'm talking about the Police Academy precinct. My God, that was another one that was like such a big deal with all the little trappings of it, and you could put it right next to the firehouse, and you could basically build your own little Manhattan. So I want to definitely get into that one for sure. And also with Halloween coming around, there's a couple of Halloween topics we might be looking at. One in particular is the Kenner toy line for Beetlejuice, as that is supposed to be getting remade as a Broadway musical, and there's a documentary in the works for it. So that was obviously, anybody that remembers the Beetlejuice line remembers that was such a very odd movie to make action figures for. A ghost that's haunting, a family inside a house that belonged to a dead couple and trying to scare them out. But it was such a huge hit, and it really was the film that catapulted Michael Keaton into playing Batman, hence Tim Burton's direction, and then spawned an animated series as well. But with this toy line, it was primarily focused on the film itself that came out in '88. And there were a couple of toys in that line that were not released that were actually tied to the cartoon. So I'm definitely going to be getting into that when we talk about that topic. Also, with the upcoming release of Terminator Dark Fate, there will be a Terminator episode. So we're going to definitely be talking about the Kenner action figures for Terminator 2 and potentially tie in with the figures that were made for T3 to Rise of Machines, the Playmates set for Terminator Salvation, and I believe NECA also did some toys for Genesis. So all that is going to be covered, and that should be a fun one too. I definitely have some interesting stories about the Terminator 2 toys, and I might try to get Marcos for that one if he happens to be available. Um, there's also going to be a special topic on toys based on the films of Steven Spielberg, because he has West Side Story, the remake, coming out later this year. I figured that would be a nice way to kind of like dive into not necessarily movies that only Spielberg produced, but also that he directed, but also the ones he produced. So we're thinking about just touching upon, like we did with the Disney episode, where that was more like a general discussion. We'll be talking about the toys based on E.T., Gremlins, Hook, Jaws, Back to the Future, even obscure ones like Small Soldiers, which, he was more of a producer on that, as that was a DreamWorks project. Um, Also, action figures based on slasher movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween. We've had like those NECA action figures, but there was also like some LJN stuff back in the day for Nightmare on Elm Street. I want to definitely talk about that one, and maybe I'll see if Charlie Cannon can jump on that because he's like a huge horror movie buff. And another one that I'm thinking about, actually, I've been talking to my cousin Richard about this, if you remember from the Marvel episode, talk about G.I. Joe. And particularly the toys, much like with Transformers, talk about the action figures that were made based on the 1987 animated film, as well as just our own love for G.I. Joe in general, having grown up on it. Um, and we'll dive into the two live action films. We'll talk about our hopes or fears about the way that Paramount is trying to reboot G.I. Joe now with Snake Eyes movie and supposedly a new Joe film. That's sounds pretty weird the way that they were describing it, but we'll talk about that when we get there. And there's going to be a topic about films that I felt deserved a toy line. So that'll be another like special editorial topic. I'm hoping to do some more interviews, just like I did with the Junk Man. So stay tuned for that. That's kind of like an impending thing. As always, I'm always looking for anybody that's worked in the toy industry or has worked for Kenner, LJN, Hasbro, Mattel. I'd like to get that insight of the inner workings of what it was like back then and even today to produce toys for a major company, and even people that specialize in selling action figures or customizing action figures. I'd like to talk to those guys and have them share their thoughts about the business. And as we get to the end of the year, the one that I've been teasing for the longest time and kind of touched on it with the Junk Man, but there will be a Star Wars discussion episode in time for the release of The Rise of Skywalker. I don't know who's going to be part of that. I'm assuming Albert Albanese will. That will probably be a lengthy I would say a 2-3 part discussion because there's so much ground that we would have to cover, and a lot more things that I didn't get to say in the Junkman interview that I think hold weight as far as my collecting of the figures, and even going beyond that. I mean, we get into micro machines, we get into the model toys, we get into the dolls that they used to sell at Disney MGM Studios to tie in with the Star Tours ride in the 90s and 80s. So there's so much ground to talk about with that, as well as the prequels and the current films. So that's one you definitely don't want to miss because that's going to be a big deal. And there may be some surprise topics here or there, but those are just kind of like the ones I'm thinking about doing and giving you a little taste of where we're at. I'm not talking about changing the format of this anytime soon, but my hope is to kind of continue to build on the views. Surprisingly, Karate Kid seems to be getting the most out of all of them, which is really shocking given that that was the only one I did on my own without any music in the background. So I think that's pretty interesting that maybe because of Cobra Kai, it just sort of caught on and maybe not as many people are talking about those toys. But thank you for supporting that one, and I hope you could support the other episodes that are up right now on the YouTube channel at AJ Epics Productions 1. That's where all of the Silver Screen Action Figure Podcast episodes are located. And as always, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at silverscreenafpodcast at gmail.com. And if you have comments, suggestions, ideas for future episodes, or if you want to just come on as a special guest and share your thoughts and memories, please email me at silverscreenafpodcast at gmail.com. Thanks a lot for your support, guys, and I hope to see you all very soon.